Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking about lesson 7.2, cube roots. Today's essential question is, how is the cube root of a number different from the square root of a number? Let's take a look at example 1. Find each cube root. So yesterday we talked about square roots. For example, the square root of 16 is 4 because 4 times 4 equals 16. Today we're talking about cube roots. So cube roots are a number when multiplied by itself 3 times gives you that number that you're looking for. So we are looking for 3 numbers that when multiplied by itself give you 8. Do you know what that number is? That's right, it's 2. 2 times 2 times 2 equals 8. So I'm going to just make this an arrow. So really, the cube root of 8 is 2. And now we have the cube root of negative 27. So here we have to think of 3 numbers when multiplied by itself give you 27. So a lot of you were thinking probably, oh, 3. 3 times 3 times 3 is indeed 27, but we're looking for a negative 27. So does that mean it should be a negative 3? Let's think. A negative times a negative is a positive. And then a positive times a negative is a negative. So yes, we should be going with a negative 3 in this case here. And then we have the cube root of 1 over 64. So here we have a fraction. Similar to what I taught you in the square root lesson, you want to make sure that if you can't simplify the fraction, you would root the numerator and denominator separately. So we're going to go ahead and find the cube root of 1. Luckily, 1's an easy number to work with because we know that 1 times 1 times 1 is 1, right? Now, what are 3 numbers when multiplied by itself give you 64? Good. If you said 4, good job. 4 times 4 times 4 is 64, right? This isn't how we write our answer. This is just our thought process. So really, the cube root of 1 over 64 is simply 1/4. Now we're being asked to evaluate each expression. So again, anytime you see the word evaluate, you want to make sure you keep in mind the order of operations. So here we have 2 times the cube root of negative 216. So are we going to work with our exponents first, which includes roots, or do we do multiplication first? We're going to simplify our exponents and our roots first. So we have to think 2 times the cube root of negative 216. Remember earlier we learned that the cube root of a negative 27 was a negative 3. So this time we know that the cube root of a negative 216 should be a negative number. Think, you can use a calculator to guess and check. What is that number when multiplied by itself 3 times is going to give you 216? Figure it out. Good. Hopefully you figured out that it's negative 6. So now all we have to do is multiply 2 times negative 6. So we have negative 12. Now go ahead and pause the video and see if you can give these a try. So number 1 is the cube root of 1. We know that 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. So your answer should simply be 1. The cube root of negative 343 is going to be a negative number that when multiplied by itself 3 times gives you 343. What is that number? Good. Hopefully you got negative 7. And then here we have a fraction. So we're going to cube root the numerator and denominator separate. So we're going to have negative 3 over, what's the cube root of 1,000? Great, 10. Okay, moving on to the next section, evaluating the expressions. Let's see how you did. So we would keep our order of operations in mind. You're going to have 18 minus 4 times. The cube root of 8 is 2, as we saw earlier. And then we're going to take care of multiplication first. So that's 4 times 2 is 8. So you have 18 minus 8 is simply 10. Number 5, we have inverse operations again. Remember we talked about this in square roots. Cubing something is the same as, is the inverse operation of cube rooting something. So we can actually undo these just by getting rid of those symbols. Now we have negative 64 plus 43. So when you find the difference of that, it's 21. But it's going to be a negative 21 because we have more negative units than positive units. And then finally, number 6, it's 5 times the cube root of 512, which is 8, minus 19, bringing everything down. And remember, you're going to do multiplication first. So 5 times 8 is 40. Subtract 19. You should be left with 21. Here we have evaluate x over 4 plus the cube root of x over 3 when x equals 192. So don't forget you're going to substitute some values in first. So 192 over 4 plus the cube root of 192 over 3. And of course you want to take care of your cube roots first. So we don't know if we can cube root 192. I definitely know that I cannot cube root 3. So can we simplify 192 divided by 3? You can, and it turns out to be 64. So this is really just the cube root of 64. And can we simplify 192 divided by 4? You can. That's 48. So now we're just left with finding the cube root of 64. What is that? Good. If you said 4, good job. And we just have 48 plus 4. So that's going to give you 52. So go ahead and pause the video and try these 2 problems on your own. Let's see how you did. Here we're being asked to evaluate the expression for the given value of the variable. Y equals 64, so we're going to plug in 64 for y. So now we have the cubed root of 8 times 64 plus 64. 8 times 64 is going to give you 512. So we have the cube root of 512 plus 64. If you remember from an earlier example, we found that the cube root of 512 is 8. So we're simply going to add 8 plus 64, and that's going to give you 72. Number 8, we're going to plug in b equals negative 3 to every b value that we see. So 2 times negative 3 minus the cubed root of 9 times negative 3. And we're going to simplify. So here we have a negative 6 minus the cubed root of negative 27. And we saw earlier that the cube root of negative 27 is negative 3. So we have negative 6 minus negative 3. That's negative 6 plus 3. Simply going to be negative 3. Example 4 says to find the surface area of the baseball display case. You might want to pause this and give it a try before you see how to do this, because I have a feeling you'll probably know how to do it on your own. So it says here that the volume of the cube is 125 cubic inches. Do you remember the formula used to find the volume of a cube? Many of you might say length times width times height. Some of you guys might remember that it's just side squared. So volume of this cube is side squared. We know that the volume is 125 cubic inches. So that's 125 equals side. This should be cubed, sorry guys, not squared, cubed. Because you're multiplying all the sides together, right? And there's 3 of them. Okay, so we're trying to isolate the s. Do you know what the inverse operation of cubing something is? Good, the cubed root. So we're going to have to cube root 125. And then we're going to also have to cube root the s cubed. So we know that the cube and the cubed root cancel out. We get s equals. Now what's the cubed root of 125? Good, it's 5. And here we're talking about inches, right? So each side is 5 inches. But they wanted us to find the surface area of the baseball display case. So we were able to find just the side. So think about how you would approach that. Well, I know that each side has an area of 5 times 5, so that's 25, right? The area of each face is 25. How many faces does a cube have? Good, 6. So if you just do 25 times 6, you're going to get your answer. So 25 times 6 is going to give you 150 square inches. Okay, so just when you thought you were done with finding the side length, you actually had to figure out the surface area of the cube. So many different steps to this problem here.